Hello, welcome to this video, and on this video, well, you know what I'm going to do, because you've seen the thumbnail, you've seen the title. Do I have to really explain what I'm going to do on this video? I'm going to be going through some of the most awful jazz rock or fusion album covers of all time, and there's some real horrendous album covers out there when you get into the world of fusion. I recently did a video which was, I think it was called when jazz rock stars take their shirts off, and there were some pretty horrendous album covers on there, and I didn't want to pick any of those again, so it might be worth going back because there's some real horrors there that I'm not going to be covering on this. This is a very important subject, and so I'm trying my best to go through the history of jazz rock and really alert people to these terrible album covers. Now, this might seem like a very silly video to do, but actually it's very important because so often a great album can be ruined by the album covers. And I think there's many a classic jazz rock album with an awful cover which it colours our perception of how good that album is. And I think on this list it's definitely the case. I'm not going to be talking about the quality of the music on the albums, although I will be bringing it with a couple of comments about that. You know, what I'm basically going to do is I've got the album covers here. There's no particular order, but I have reserved one for the '1 place, which is almost like the classic awful jazz rock cover. It's so bad I think it's actually very good. Shall we just kick off, shall we? So I'm going to kick off with this album. I'll just pull it up here. Come on, pull up. Are you going to pull up? Come on, what's about with my laptop? Here we go. So, there's the first one. Kiss My Axe by Al Di Meola. Now, when I chose this list, I hadn't heard the news that Al Di Meola is currently in hospital. He apparently had a heart attack or a heart problem whilst performing a gig, you know, and he's been rushed into hospital. I think he's doing okay. Of course, Al Di Meola is one of the most legendary jazz rock musicians of all time, one of the great guitar players of all time, and I wish him well. You know, Al, we love you very much. You've made some incredible albums over the years. You're an incredible guitarist, but every now and then you do verge towards a bit of a rotten album cover. I covered one on the video where I looked at jazz rock stars taking their shirts off, but I think this one is even more horrendous, right? So this album was Al Di Meola's, you know, big return to playing electric guitar, although he is holding acoustic guitar on the cover, which is a misdemeanor straight off, you know, I think, you know, because it's like, you know, is he going to be playing electric guitar? But let's just try and deal with this quickly and move on. So we have Al Di Meola there. He's got a very strong hairline there, which is very interesting to me. I'm always fascinated by Al Di Meola's hair. If you track his hair, you know, through the years, it goes through all sorts of different processes and situations and looks. It's quite an incredible thing. And here we have a very aggressive, dark, shiny hairline there. He's looking very moody into the camera. Very handsome man, holding his acoustic guitar. And the title of this album is called Kiss My Axe. It's not a great title, is it? You know, it's Al Di Meola's great return to electric, you know, fusion, and he's decided to call it Kiss My Axe. I think it's awful. And he is being supported in this visual treat by a young lady in the background who is obviously in the buff. It's a bare lady. Now, this is a thing that I find very disturbing on jazz rock album covers, is when they use nudity. I've actually put up here Oliver Nelson and Lou Donaldson's album called Back Talk. This nearly made the list, you know. I don't know whether I want to see these bare bottoms on an album cover, and then this awful sort of pun, back talk, and then we see these two people's backs and their bare bottoms. I'm not too sure. But here, the bringing together of the term Kiss My Axe and this young lady in the background with her hands seductively placed on Al Di Meola's shoulder in this sort of black space of nothingness. What the hell is going on? What is going on? Al, what are you trying to, what message are you trying to get across? Well, you know, I have got a degree in art. I was originally a painter. You know, I know you know me as a sort of proggy drummer, and now opinionated middle-aged YouTuber. But what it says to me is that Aldi is some sort of love god, and the women, he has these beautiful naked women around him that are obviously attracted to him because they place their hands on him. He's looking very tanned and seductively into the camera with an air of attitude, and he's telling everyone to kiss my axe. I don't know. It's there's a certain arrogance to this cover, and there's a certain arrogance that goes through Aldi Meola's music, and it's really personified. This is getting quite serious. I wanted this to be a funny video, and I'm getting quite serious here, and I feel bad because Aldi Meola's at the moment sat in hospital trying to get over a heart attack. So I think I'll move on. I'll leave you with that. That's the first one on the list. Shall we move on, because there's some real horrors now. Of course, the real master of awful album covers is Herby Man, and I think he didn't quite make number one on my list of awful album covers where jazz rock superstars take their shirts off. But it's the album, you all know I'm not even going to mention it. Do you want to see it, this one? Oh my god, that is an awful album cover. But I've got some more here. I thought Herby Man has to be on the list, and you've got such a choice. So the album cover by Herby Man, which is also pretty awful, is this one. It's an album called Superman, and it shows Herby Man opening up his sort of flasher raincoat to expose it looks like, I don't know if this is supposed to be a Superman costume, but it looks like a sort of dancer's leotard with a very cheap, awful parody of the Superman logo, but instead of Superman, it's HM for Herby Man, of course. He's sort of, his hat is flying off and his glasses are flying off as he opens up the coat. And most worryingly, his belt buckle is undone. Now, I'm assuming this is because he's coming out of a telephone booth. But the thing is, Herbie, is what Superman does is he goes into the telephone booth and then he gets changed. There's no point in going into the telephone booth only to then come out and then get changed in front of everybody. That just doesn't work. There's an absolute underlying misunderstanding of Superman and what Superman does here. And then, of course, with this awful album cover, we have another pun. We have Kiss My Axe, and here we have Superman. What the hell? And it says in the corner, includes Superman, quotes. I don't know if that's a tune or the actual superhero is included on this album. Herbie, you were a master of this. There's so much wrong with this. Why is the phone box on the side? Is it in some sort of time warp space environment? Is he in a sort of parallel universe? It's glowing white in a sort of radioactive fashion. What the hell's going on this album? It's truly awful. Herbie, you're the genius. And then to just to finish it off, is the graphics at the top, the text, which I think is trying to mimic the sort of Superman writing. He doesn't do it very well at all. So we have this yellow stripe with this red lettering with a sort of blue drop shadow, which I think has nothing to do with Superman whatsoever. It's truly awful. It's an ugly thing. It's a horrible thing. It doesn't make sense. I don't know if it's supposed to make us have a little, chuckle, and I don't know whether Herbie's just trying to entertain us. Well, if he is doing that, he's achieved it. And I think if you take a philosopher like Roland Barthes, I'm going to get this heavy now. Roland Barthes would often try and point out that, when you're assessing something artistic, there are these other elements that we're all aware of, but nobody wants to mention in these things, and it actually affects our perception of art in a way that the initial artistic sort of motivation from the artist, it sort of undoes this. There's this otherness to the art. Well, I didn't explain that very well. It's the best I could do at this time of the morning. And for me, with Herby Man, it's his beard. Because Herby Man's obviously had a very sort of long Bruce Forsyth, chin, which he chose to accentuate with a really strange beard. And this is one of the great beards of jazz fusion. Of course, he's got quite the high hairline, and then he's got the sideboards. And it makes his face very elongated. I'm not sure it was the best thing to do, but I think it was a trademark. I don't know if you're playing the flute, or maybe some dribble will come out the flute, and this is there to sort of soak up the dribble and stop it running onto your sort of, leotard, Superman leotard there. The whole thing is preposterous, isn't it? I think I have pretty much destroyed this one. Shall we move on to the next one? Herby Man, Superman. That's a terrible, terrible cover. Right. This is like sometimes, and there's so many times here where these album covers stray into the world of nightmare. The album that I am placing at number one, you can probably guess what it is if you've looked at the thumbnail, so there's no surprise there. It is truly like a nightmare vision, and this album is also a nightmare vision, and it is a fusion album. It's quite interesting because it's from a guitarist that we associate with progressive rock, but this guy was one of the great, and he's one of the great fusion guitarists, and I haven't spoken to him about him much on this channel. So let's go to the next one, and it is a solo album by the guitarist from Focus, Jan Akkerman. Right, now have a look at that. So what we have is Jan Akkerman. He's in bed. He's in the nude. How this didn't get on my, when jazz rock stars take their shirt off. But I think the reason is because the fact that he's got his shirt off and he's in bed in the nude is not what makes this so terrible. He is in bed with an acoustic guitar that has one arm that is tapping Jan on the back. Jan does not look like he's asleep. He looks like he's enjoying, in an ecstatic state, this little scratch from his acoustic guitar one-armed creature that he is in bed with. I'm assuming that the guitar is proffering its erotic services to Jan, and Jan could well be about to accept this, except he has got his back turned. Maybe this guitar is torturing him in some way, but why would he be in bed with the guitar? He's got no pillow as well. Of course, does a guitar need a pillow? But surely Jan needs a pillow in this situation. So why is there no pillow there? Does he really sleep with no pillow? Anyway, what he's about to do to the guitar is something that I don't want in my head. Right? The whole thing is in this sort of television sort of screen, so it's got a voyeuristic aspect. It's got this brown sepia seediness about it, and then that awful Jan Akkerman logo at the top, with this glowing yellow neon lights look. The whole thing is truly awful aesthetically. This is just awful. And again, I'm pretty sure he's not playing acoustic guitar on the album. He's playing electric guitar, so he's against the trade's description album. So he's done the same thing that Al Di Meola did. But Al Di Meola, all he's doing, he's sat there with a bare lady, isn't he, in the background? That's all he's doing. I mean, it's it makes you feel uncomfortable. But this one is on another level. I mean, what the hell was going on in Jan Akkerman's mind? Maybe this is what caused him to get ejected from Focus in the first place. Maybe this is with Tis Van Leer, just maybe there were certain things that Jan Akkerman was into that, the Focus guys just couldn't tolerate, and I don't know. Look at the armpit of the guitar, the arm on the guitar. It's so dark. It's like infinity in that armpit. The whole thing's awful. And from a graphic point of view, the way they've superimposed that sort of hand, this sort of hand doing this, which is obviously drawn, it's not executed well. So the hand doesn't look like it's actually touching his back. It just looks like he's floating in space. The whole thing is rubbish. It's just rubbish, Jan. It's a good album as well. It's a bit meandery. If you go and check it out, it's a full-on fusion album, and I don't think Jan gets the credit he should for being one of the great, 70s jazz fusion guitarists, because he was in Focus, and Focus is always seen as a progressive rock band, but they weren't. They were a progressive rock fusion band. They sat right in the middle. And Mother Focus is a very, very strange but interesting jazz rock fusion album, if you want to go and check that one out. But I'm not going to get into all that. That's not what this is about. It's about us sitting and looking at this album cover and just appreciating how awful these musicians could get in the 70s. It's almost as like these very good musicians, very competent musicians, who had struggled playing their instrument, were not pop star material, they're musician material. And then suddenly in the 70s, this focus is on them. And they got record labels, and these record labels have budgets, and they've got album cover budgets. And so they then indulge almost like their egotism. And they want to portray themselves as a sex symbol, or as a pop star, or as being cool. And it just does not work, because these people aren't cool. They're jazz rock musicians. And there are a few of them. Jaco Pastorius, he was pretty cool. There's a few of them, but on the whole, they're not charismatic people. They're just normal people that can play their instruments well. And I don't know whether there's too much cocaine use at the same time, which is just clouding people's judgments. But I find it really surprising that a record company trying to put their budget behind what is essentially instrumental music to grab a part of that sort of scene that was there in the 70s would think that an album cover like that would do the job. It's absolutely unbelievable. So I'll move on. Right, the next one is quite famous in the history of jazz rock, and it's almost like a jazz album more than a jazz rock album, but there's some rock beats. I don't care when the album cover's awful. Here it is. Chick Corea, Friends. It's quite famous. This album is an absolute brilliant album. This is an example of a classic album which I think has been demoted in the sort of pantheon of greatness because of this just awful cover. Now, Chick Corea is another one that can make pretty terrible covers. I'm thinking of something like Mad Hatter or The Leprechaun, these sort of twee faux prog, Chick in Fairyland covers, but they're executed very well. I think that The Leprechaun's a very pretty, although very kitsch, album cover, as is Mad Hatter, and there's a few others in there. There's an album cover by Chick, I think it's for a jazz album he made called Origin, and I think he designed the cover on a very early example of paint in Windows 95 or something. It's just truly awful. Can't believe it exists. But this one is the famous one. So what we have here is Chick Corea, Friends. Now on this album we've got Steve Gadd on there. I think Eddie Gomez is on bass. I'm not too sure. Joe Farrell on saxophones on there. This is a fantastic album. Now there's two albums from this era that are like this. And this is plotting the move of jazz rock musicians towards straight jazz. This definitely is the thing that happened going into the 1980s. And this has tempered my position, I'm being serious now, it's tempered my position on blaming the Young Lions for this conservatism. It's something that Jason Marsalis pointed out to me. This move that the jazz rock musicians themselves, from jazz rock to pure jazz. We think of Herbie Hancock with VSOP. We think of Chick Corea with like three quartets or trio music. We think of Pat Metheny coming out with Rejoicing and A21, 82 or whatever it's called. And this is one of those albums. Now, Three Quartets is often hailed as an absolute masterpiece. This album isn't, and for me it's on the same level. The playing is incredible. But the idea of trying to portray the heaviness and incredibleness of this album by having, a collection of Smurfs placed together in another black space, to represent the modern jazz rock, acoustic jazz, whatever this band is truly awful. And then the typeface, especially the Chick Corea, the Friends isn't so bad, but the Chick Corea typeface looks like something off a children's TV show. It's just, it's awful. How many people have been put off this album by that cover? All right. And the other thing is, it's just so cheap. You know, I mean, Chick must have gone, we need an album cover, and he's gone down the shops and he's bought some Smurfs. And why is he pushing the Smurfs anyway? What's the Smurfs got to do with it? It's truly awful. They got the instrumentation right. We got bass, you know, piano, drums, and saxophone. Although that does look like a trumpet. And again, you know, there's no trumpet on this Chick, so really. They're stood on this sort of, are they on some sort of shiny surface, so they're reflected, so you get this feeling that they're again in this abstract space. Do I have to go try and drag anything more out of this awful album cover? This deserves a reissue, you know, so whoever handles the Chick Corea estate, you know, see if there's any extra sessions from this and bring this album out, because this is a brilliant album, and change that cover and put something dark and intense, you know, which is what this music is, you know, not just dark and intense, it's playful. You know, Chick Corea's stuff is always very playful. And I think that's what the problem is. Chick Corea's stuff is playful, and he wants to create these playful, light, entertaining covers, but I think he missed the mark here. This is universally hated by so many jazz fans. I will move on. Oh my God, here we have another one in the genre of The Nightmare. Now, anyone in the UK will remember an advert that came out many years ago for some sort of chocolate treat, and it featured this sort of Humpty Dumpty egg thing on a wall. And anyone in England will be horrified when I say this. Chock-a-doobie! Do you remember that? Chock-a-doobie! Right, it upset me deeply, that did. And this album cover seems to, you know, it seems to predict that advert because it was made before. What is going on? Right, so let me just really break this down. It's a painting, right? This is a painting, so they've employed an artist to come up with this, right? Larry Coryell had a great fusion band called the 11th House. The 11th House is one of those bands that none of the album covers are particularly good. Introducing the 11th House is okay. The actual psychedelic picture in the middle I quite like, but it's framed by these awful graphics, which is just terrible. Level 1 is just them inside diamond shapes, and it's just rubbish. Aspects is okay. Sort of another bare lady descending a staircase, but she is all out of focus. I don't really know what they're trying to do. Anyway. Later on in the 70s, there was this big coup as Alphonse Mouzon, the drummer at 11th House, and Larry Coryell came back together to make this album. And there is some absolutely brilliant 11th House-esque fusion on here. There's also some quite dodgy tracks as well. So this is what we have. Back Together Again by Larry Coryell and Alphonse Mouzon. And how have they chose to depict this sort of coming together of these, you know, two jazz rock legends? By having a Humpty Dumpty style egg sat in an egg cup with a spoon, inviting us to pick that spoon up and try and smash his brains in, which somebody has already tried to do, and the cracks have been plastered over. He sits in front of a wallpaper which has a sort of parade of marching ducks. Now, we know Larry Coryell was having, you know, certain drug issues at this time, you know, we know about this. But at some point he was sat in the record company and somebody walked in and said, look, we've had this idea, we're going to have a Humpty Dumpty style egg sat in an egg cup with his little legs dangling out with a huge bow tie around his neck. With a spoon, we're going to have some sort of spacey abstract pattern on the bottom of the egg cup that makes no sense whatsoever. You know, he's going to have his little paws tucked in, you know, behind his huge collars, with a nice smile on his face as he contemplates having his brain smashed out by a silver spoon that will be, you know, placed behind. And Larry Coryell turned around and said, yeah, that sounds great. It's truly awful. Atlantic, that's on Atlantic Records. Okay, let's move on. I haven't talked about this fusion band that much on this channel. I'm talking about them now, and it is of course the great European jazz rock band, the sort of European Weather Report band called Passport, which was Klaus Dogging's band. And here we have this album cover. Now, Passport again have some truly weird album covers. They can only be described as weird, right? The one before was Nightmarish. This is nightmarish, but it's even more than that. It's weird. It's just strange. It's weird. It's like it's though you've had too much cheese and gone to bed, you know, and had a fitful sleep full of strange imagery, and you wake up sweaty in the morning trying to make sense of what was going on in that dream. So what have we got going on here, right? So this is an album called Looking Through. Again, we have that sort of. It's not a pun. Anyway, we have this person. I don't know if this is depicting somebody in the band. It looks like it is. They've got the sort of this sort of longish hair. It looks like a jazz rock. They've got a nice scarf, and they're sat in front of a seascape. They're wearing glasses, and for some reason they are bright green, but the eyes, which look very baggy. This person's very tired. And the eyes are contained within the glasses, and as they lift the glasses off, what we see is that this head is actually see-through in glasses shapes, and you can see through to the seascape to a sunset. Again, Atlantic Records, round about the same time as that Corea Muzon album. So, what else going on? Why is he green? Right? Why make him green? Okay. It would make more sense if he wasn't green, wouldn't it? Then we could say, yeah, the idea is that there's this person in front of a seascape, they got glasses on, but when you pick up, you are looking through their head at the sunset. Which is pretty awful. But why is he green? Is he some sort of alien, amphibian creature that's come to Earth? It's really strange. And look at the eyes. The eyes aren't right at all, are they? The lights from I think it's the sun, but it seems too white to be the sun. That is glinting through one of the empty space eye pockets at you. The whole thing's very trippy. Passport, very great jazz rock band. As a kid, I would see their albums, a big jazz rock fan. Oh, this Passport, you know, shall I buy one of those albums? And I would look at a cover like that and go, nah. You're getting into something way above your head if you start buying album covers like that. I was only a young teenage lad at that time, you know, and you know, I'm frightened to buy an album like that. What are you gonna get? What are you gonna get? It contained some sort of alien messages that would have warped my brain forever, but it didn't because I never bought the album. Right, let's move on, shall we? Oh my God, this is really, really right. So there is this sort of awful thing where you know, jazz rock musicians, fusion musicians will try and bring in some sort of sexual connotation. I don't know whether they was sort of out on tour, you know, and they wanted to try and get a piece of that Led Zepp action with, you know, with all the groupies, you know, all this stuff that went down in the 70s that we're now looking back at and going, oh my God, this is absolutely terrible. And, you know, to destroy the careers of some people whilst ignoring the actions of other people. But what we have here is, do I even have to talk about this? So we have this sort of pencil-y coloured crayon sketch. At the top it says Dave Grusin, don't touch. We have, it looks like a sort of 3 hands, right? These hands have no arms, and they have some poorly, you know, rendered fiery movement as these hands rush towards this, what looks like the disembodied part of a woman, the lower torso, but where you would expect there to be one anatomical feature, instead we have this mouth with teeth with a finger going towards it, which looks like it's about to bite that finger. This is just strange, you know. I actually think that whoever made this, they should track them down, and they should have to face some sort of criminal proceedings for making an album cover like this. It really needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. It's like sketchy. There's like a sort of penciled box that this is happening in, and the fingernails. One of the fingernails is bright red, and the other one in the background is blue, and it evokes some sort of occult witchcraftness to me. Believe me, the warning at the top of "Don't touch," I would follow that warning if faced with this in any way, shape or form. And these disembodied fiery hands that are attempting to touch this are dicing with something they shouldn't be dicing with a strangeness that you should never approach. Why would someone like Dave Grusin, you know, the king of a sort of middle of the road, you know, faceless Fusac, you know, tasteful but tasteless, the most innocuous jazz rock on the planet, you know, why would somebody like Dave Grusin want to fill our minds with something like this? Why would he want to do that, Dave? Why would you want to do that? You know, again, late 70s, maybe a bit too much coke, maybe a bit too, I don't know. It's just truly awful. I mean, I'm trying to critique these for you. You can see I'm sat over in the corner of my screen, so I can really put the album cover up big for you to look at. And you're looking at it right now. Let's move on. Oh my God! Randy Brecker hanging in the city. I did a video about the Breer Brothers, and I pointed out I love the Breer Brothers. They're incredible, but they do tend to go towards this sort of funky disco-ness every now and then, which can be really good, but at its worst is when Randy Brecker starts singing. There's always a track on a Breer Brothers album where Randy Brecker decides to sing, isn't there? There's always a track. And these are so bad, I don't know whether they're actually masterpieces. You know, it's like Randy Brecker, one of the great jazz trumpet players, his brother Michael Brecker, one of the great soloists in the history of jazz, and they've got this deal, and they've got this popularity, and it's like Randy Brecker has sort of abused this by going, right, I shouldn't deserve to be making songs, right? I'm not Joni Mitchell, I'm not Bob Dylan, I'm not Neil Young, but I've got this chance to write these songs, you know, so, you know, let me get in there. And all the band are going, oh no, Randy's got another song, but we've got to let him do it. And I've been aware of these songs all the time, for a long time now, and when I did the video, I said it would be great to actually compile all these songs together, not realising that he's already done it with this album. Randy Brecker, Hanging in the City, which is from the early 2000s, and it's just full of his strange songs where he has this sort of alter ego called Randroid, and it says on the cover, introducing Randroid. And Randroid is this sort of New York musician that goes around New York having, let's call them sexcapades, right? And then it is commented on by this sort of taxi driver. This is a whole concept album here, which thankfully has been ignored by the mainstream jazz press. I knew nothing about this album. The album cover is awful because it illustrates the contents of this album so well. So what do we have? We have this sort of Randy Brecker's name is broken up in this sort of streety early 2000s hip-hoppy sort of cool way. It's all shattered and postmodern. It's on the angle. And then we have the title, Hanging in the City. It's one of those attempts by a middle-aged, you know, jazz musician to appear down with the kids and down with the streets. So you get this title, Hanging in the City. We have a picture which looks like a Polaroid. So this is something that's been photographed candidly, and we have this sort of blue shattery frame going around it. We have a taxi, I think it is, and we have Randy Brecker in the front with a sort of awful psychedelic, Hawaiian t-shirt on in his trademark berry with the name Randroid over the top. They've really gone to town on this, and he is looking gleefully back at himself, who is sat in the back with two ladies. So he's obviously going somewhere with these two ladies to do God knows what with his trumpet and his trademark beret. He's looking at the camera through his rose tinted glasses, and he's doing this woo while the girls look seductively at me, and it's covered with this sort of graphics. So Randy Brecker, that name's shattered, and then In the City shattered, and the sort of the apostrophe that takes the place of the G in hanging, because it's not hanging in the city, this is hanging in the city. And we have right next to Randy Brecker, the Kerr. We have the word Kerr, which for me suggests a very established Old English name that we will often call certain people who we don't look on in a favourable light. It's a good Old English word. It begins with W and it ends with Kerr. I'm not going to say it here. And the fact that emblazoned on top of Randy Brecker is that Kerr, I just wish they'd filled the whole thing out, because it would just make more sense. It's all in sort of some police spotlight. They're obviously up to no good. If you put on the album, there's a couple of moments where Brecker comes on and does a solo, and it's pretty cool, but it's pretty sort of lame drum machine-y, early 2000s attempt at pop music by someone who hasn't got a clue what was relevant back then. The whole album's awful. This album cover is really awful. I'm really pleased to have been able to unearth something this bad for my channel, and I'm sure many of you don't know about it. If you do know about it and you like this album, please unsubscribe now. I don't want you here. Right, anyway, let's move on. Okay, we got another one from the Breer Brothers. This is one of the greatest jazz rock albums ever made. This is an example of an unbelievable album ruined by a terrible cover. Now, if we look at the Breer Brothers album covers, they're okay. It usually features them on the cover in some way, sort of trying to ape the sort of pop look of the 70s at that time. The back-to-back album cover I really like. I think that's a cool cover. But the rest of them they're okay, but they never won over anybody with their covers. This is their best album by far. This is an absolute masterpiece. So this album is a furious, ferocious live recording of the Breer Brothers with Terry Bozzio on drums, which just seems to give them a great big boot up the bum and put them into a space which they weren't there before. Beyond the sort of funky fusion sound, which a lot of people really love, but on this album it's just really brutal. The album is called Heavy Metal Bebop, so it's this idea of they're playing those sort of bebop licks but in a heavy way, and they deliver. I think that's a great title, but they chose to illustrate heavy metal with the sort of Metal for Mothers chrome effect look on that heavy metal, but the chrome is overdone so much that you can't really see the word heavy metal. And then of course bebop has been represented in this sort of, again, neon glowing sort of graphic. That is not correct. It's stuck up in the corner. The Breer Brothers, that just does not work. So that is a bad bit of graphics for me. But what's really interesting is they decided to choose to, market this incredible album with themselves sat on the cover, and Randy Brecker, trademark beret, trumpet in hand, looks like this sort of 1930s view of jazz. It's that sort of look, isn't it? He's looking very, pastoral, Browns. He's got the shoes and the socks, and I'm sure the socks have been pulled up, but they're not long enough to, and so we're getting a little bit of hairy leg. All this is enough to get on the thing here. But Michael Brecker, one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time, he's portraying, which I think he's trying to portray the heavy metal. So, Brecker represents the bebop here. Randy Brecker represents, or shall I call him Randroid? Randroid represents the bebop, and Michael Brecker is representing heavy metal. Now, this shouldn't happen anyway. There's never in history should Michael Brecker be used to represent heavy metal. He's there with his saxophone. He hasn't got his saxophone out. He ain't going to play it. Randroid's got his saxophone out. And they have attempted to make him look like a what? Is that supposed to be an alien spaceman? Really? He's wearing a pair of black trousers tucked into a pair of black boots and sewing on some silver epaulets whilst wearing a motorbike crash helmet. Does that really evoke space or heavy metal? Or is that just what what Michael was wearing on the day when they did the photo shoot? You know, maybe he'd ridden on his motorbike to the photo shoot, and maybe that's how he went round at the time. If that's the case, fair enough, right, fair enough. But what has he sat on? You know, Randy is sat on his trumpet case, which is the most stupid seat you could ever have. You know, because it's too low, it's going to expose your hairy legs. But Michael looks like he's sat on a toilet. This is rubbish. And this is a great album, ruined by a terrible cover. And of course, they are sat in this sort of white ethereal space. Right, so we've got to the last one now. You all know what it's going to be. It's a classic, it's a masterpiece of truly awful jazz rock covers. And it is, of course, if I can just find it, right, because I've got it in a separate place here. Look at that beauty. This, I don't think this is bad. I think this is good. You could go around the circle of brilliant album covers. You know, you can start at that, you know, like Dark Side of the Moon's a brilliant album cover, you know, or maybe Relayer by Yes, you know, all these incredible albums. You start to go back and they can start to get worse and worse and worse. And you get to a point where it's so awful that the circle joins back up with greatness, and that's what we have here. It's just truly great. Billy Cobham and George Duke formed a band in the mid-70s. So Cobham had this incredible band in the early 70s after Spectrum, and it was basically like the Breer Brothers. It's one of my favourite jazz rock groups in history. They made Crosswinds, Total Eclipse, they made Shabazz, Funky Thide of Sings, which is a slight drop down in quality, but it's still brilliant. Then he teams up with George Duke and forms a real superstar band. I think he's got Alfonso Johnson on bass. I think it's John Scofield on guitar, and they make this fantastic album. Now, when I was a kid, I had the Rolling Stones Book of Rock and Roll, and when I looked up Billy Cobham, it got, you know, some good ratings for Spectrum and Crosswinds. This one had a special award for being awful, right? And so I thought this album was awful. When I got the best of Billy Cobham that came out on Atlantic, it had a track on here called Do What You Wanna, which was a sort of funky affair, which I thought was okay. It wasn't Crosswinds, it was okay, but I thought, if that's the best track on here, this is going to be a truly awful album. And eventually, at some point, I was in a shop and I found it, and I can remember looking at this cover and thinking, what the hell has gone wrong here? And I didn't buy it. As time's gone on, it's actually a very interesting album, which sort of has a very sort of Zappa-esque, humorous take on fusion by an incredible lineup with some of the greatest fusion players, and there's some fantastic stuff on this album. The album cover depicts Billy Cobham and George Duke, right, in a dystopian, futuristic landscape, where they are out in some sort of desert realm, you know, framed by some sort of post-apocalyptic sky. There's obviously been some sort of awful disaster happened in this dystopian space, and we can see sort of the black vultures of doom flying around in the distance. And in the background we can see like a cityscape, and we can see like a mountainscape. From the cityscape emerges Billy Cobham, but Billy Cobham has not got a body. He has got a hand for a body, and that hand is walking through the desert, creating these fingertip footprints. Billy Cobham's hand body does look like it's walking through the desert, whereas George Duke's hand body, which contains his trademark dangly African-esque, you know, necklace and a big sort of jewel, you know, ring, that hand is also galloping through the desert. But he's coming from some other space which looks like some sort of mountainscape. And the hand may only have 3 fingers on it. We can't see a little finger. And it is galloping in a way where George Duke with his hand body would not be able to sustain balance. So I've always felt that the rendering of this artistically is Billy Cobham looks like Billy Cobham. He is looking at George Duke with sort of, you know, he's pleased and happy to see George Duke there. He's looking over at him. He's pleased with this situation as he jauntily looks over at George and ambles, you know, nonchalantly through this dystopian landscape. But George doesn't really look like George, does he? His face isn't quite right. And he's looking right at me and he's grinning. He's grinning as he's about to flop over onto the side, and I'm pretty sure once, with that big head centre of gravity, once he has, you know, flopped over, there's no way he can get up, you know, but he doesn't seem bothered about this. At the bottom, in that sort of shattery writing, it says live on tour in Europe. So is this a depiction of the tour? You know, is this how they went on tour? Live, and live is in quotation marks for some reason, and then this huge space between live and then on tour in Europe. You know, they've gone to great lengths making this album cover. Someone's been commissioned to paint this. The typeface of the Billy Cobham George Duke bag at the top is this sort of futuristic, you know, spacey typeface. It's a rare one. You normally get another one at this point, which is sort of the sort of digital watch typeface, but here we have this sort of blue, really detailed, strange typeface, and then in a sort of sky blue at the bottom, which you can't really read the on tour bit. We've got slight. I'm really getting it again. Atlantic Records. Atlantic Records had some artist. He must have been related to somebody who worked there. It was on drugs, and they just had to have his album covers. That's the only explanation to this. To the Passport one, it's all the same bloke, I reckon. It's some guy that was the troublesome nephew of somebody who owned Atlantic Record that had taken too many drugs and for rehabilitation was there with their paint box painting these strange album covers, which were then foisted on these, you know, musicians who had no choice. That's the only explanation to this. This is nightmarish. Now, George Duke, the word Duke can be used, and when you pluralise it, Dukes is a name for hand. You know, put up your Dukes. I've put up my Dukes. I've put up my George Dukes. And of course, Billy Cobham, it doesn't take much to go from Billy Cobham to Billy Cobhands. So I really think this should have been called the Billy Cobhands George Dukes Band, and then this would have made more sense. Without that, this absolutely makes no sense whatsoever, does it? And it's nightmarish. And for many years, I have been plagued by this nightmarish vision. And I've tried to depict it on the thumbnail for this video. But if you didn't see it, I'm going to put it up now. And for me, I think this is my greatest thumbnail on YouTube so far. So here it is. Hello there, we're done, we're finished. It's nearly an hour. This video's 50 minutes long. Hope you liked it. Bit of fun. I'm about to film a very serious video now, but I have had a bit of fun looking at these album covers. There's some great albums here, really are. And these covers are just wonderful, aren't they? In a lot of enjoyment they've given to, you know, us, haven't they, this morning? Really great. So I hope you appreciate that and you took this video with the humour that was intended, and anybody who's involved with any of these albums that is watching this video, you know, you should be ashamed of yourself! Anyway, I shouted. So people have started moaning about me shouting on this channel. They're moaning about me shouting. You stop shouting. I think, do you get what you've come to see? Do you understand what I'm doing here? The people don't understand what I'm doing. The casual viewer does not understand what is going on here and what I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to achieve something very important, and it involves me shouting. I'm about to film a video, and I'm going to put this video out before this one. So, and I'm going to try and explain what my position is here and why I do stuff like this. You know, why am I here making silly videos about silly album covers? You know, what am I doing it for? And I'm not going to go into that now. So there's a link there to that video, so you can go and check that one out. And it's really been inspired by this video. I'm definitely I'm in the place now to make this next video where I'm going to argue my case for my existence in the YouTube sphere. I don't think any YouTuber ever does that, but I feel I want to do that because it's going to get me into certain areas, you know, and why I'm sometimes very serious, why I'm sometimes very silly, why I'm sometimes very subjective, why I sometimes attempt to be objective, why I am trying to, you know, knock contemporary jazz all the time, why my issues are with that. You know, I'm going to get into all that on a very serious video. But the thing is, with this, is for me, there is a collective experience associated with these albums, especially for people of my age, and I'm assuming for people who watch the channel. And what I enjoy is, in the world of stuff, I enjoy the fact that I get to talk about stuff which has been with me my whole life. I have had these, you know, conversations with fellow jazz musicians, rock musicians and jazz fans about these album covers. It has been a source of entertainment for me and my friends for many, many years. And I think this has not been documented historically. And so I'm doing this very tiny service to humanity by creating this video where I can just document the fact that the ridiculousness of these album covers, which points to a certain cultural climate which we have moved past many years ago, was noted, right? This should not pass by in human history without being pointed at. The fact that a lot of money was spent on a genre that for a few years was producing incredible music to actually quite a mainstream audience, to a popular audience. This is a little blip that happened when jazz, blues and rock music and funk and soul all came together to become the preeminent cultural form of that time. And within that, some anomalies happened, you know. So when you hear about, you know, people driving down through Hollywood in the mid-70s and looking up to see a huge advert for the new Chick Corea album, this is an incredible thing, and a byproduct of that was the creation of these album covers. This is never going to happen again, where a record company commissions an artist to create something like this. With AI, I think we could see the emergence of this again as artists who really have no idea about aesthetic qualities, you know, visual aesthetic qualities at least, because they're musicians, will be commissioning AI to produce some awful covers. I've seen this happening already. So this is a warning, and it shouldn't go unnoticed. It shouldn't go unnoticed. Anyway, I think I'm done. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please like it. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe, ring the notification bell. If you want to support me over on Patreon, please come over. There is absolute massive content. There's a ton of patrons there. It's a little community now. This evening we are meeting, you know, online. We're all going to have a chat. You know, normally I have a guest, but I haven't got a guest today. I've decided we're just going to go on. We're going to chat about whatever, and that video will then appear in my Patreon for them to watch, and they can go and see themselves chatting about this stuff. They can become a part of it, and if we get onto something really cool and good, that video will appear here. All right, that's what you get if you become a patron of mine. Plus you get a whole access to loads of different albums and downloads and loads of different video content. There's also lots of funny stuff and silly stuff. I am really enjoying it over on Patreon, and for me, that is the way the music industry should be. You got your little fan base of like-minded people, creative people, and there's all sorts of creativity going on there. So if you want to come and support me on Patreon, come over. But if you can't because you're a busy person, but you do want to support me, but you don't want to waste time, you know, because you know you're never going to go and look, which a number of people have said, and for that reason, so I can find a way of extracting cash from them, I have created the YouTube tip jar, which is down below. And the Edwards YouTube tip jar. Very straightforward. You just click on it and you give me money. Now, why should you want to give me money? I'll tell you why. Is because the whole of my life I have been a poor jazz and prog drummer. I've never made any money, and I am not making any money now. And as I become old and decrepit and I'm unable to play in 1916 at 180 BPM, and that time is coming, I need to support myself and my family. And my plan is to support it through YouTube and through Patreon and through the stuff I'm doing here, the valuable the valuable service I am doing to modern culture with these videos. And if you feel that that is worthwhile, the more you pay me, the more I can do it, basically. And you will find that that is very, very important. And I'm pretty sure my videos in the future may well, save mankind as we move into that dystopian future, depicted on the cover of this Billy Cobham George Duke album, as AI does take over. We do live in some sort of metaverse created by Mark Zuckerberg where, we have got hands for bodies. And when that happens, I'll have warned you right now. It's awful. He's shouting again. Stop him.